What's the exact link between mental health and our gut?
There's 6 different plant-based categories. Even if you look at the government guidelines, right? So they're very focused on eat more fruit and eat more vegetables, but actually they're missing the other 4 of the super 6.
Is coffee good for your gut?
Dun, dun, dun.
Probiotic and prebiotic. Is it good for me?
This whole concept that we've been led to believe that we need to take a probiotic every day for good gut health is not science-backed.
Really?
Yeah.
High-waisted jeans trap your gas in.
Can put more stress on your gut. So if you're having a bloated day, it's a thing called tight pants syndrome. Yeah.
Would you recommend someone on a plant-based diet? Gut health is absolutely everywhere, from different juice plans, from people telling us to cut out entire food groups. The market is actually flooded with advice that's not always backed by science. And that's why today I'm so excited to share this episode with you with Dr. Megan Rossi, an award-winning gut health scientist and registered dietitian. And as the founder of the Gut Health Doctor, she empowers everyone to take control of their own health and well-being. Because actually, 1 in 2 of us actually suffers with our gut health. So today, I've booked you an appointment with her. So if you're frustrated by constant bloating, you're confused by conflicting dietary recommendations, or if you've wondered if mainstream advice might actually be doing more harm than good, you're in for an eye-opening discussion. We are deep diving into challenging myths, questioning industry practices, and even tackling controversial topics that a lot of people will probably shy away from, but I will tap into. So before we get started in this episode, I'd be so grateful if you could press the follow and like and subscribe button. If you're new here, welcome to a Millennial Mind family, where every week we discover topics that allow us to grow, learn, and change our perspective. And if you love this episode, I'd be so interested to know in the comments too. Thank you so much for always supporting me. Let's get into this episode. Megan, hello.
Hey, it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you so much. Welcome to Millennial Mind. I am so excited to get into this conversation because all I see on social media is people talking about their gut microbiome, leaky gut, bloating symptoms. Everyone's constantly talking about their gut and nobody knows what on earth to do about it because there's so much misinformation out there. So I guess the first question I want to ask is, why is our gut health so important?
So it really is a landmark scientific discovery. So I think that's so important because there's so many trends, they come and they go and all that sort of stuff. But the thing about gut health is that it's actually founded on this discovery that we have trillions of bacteria in our gut. So actually, if you rewind a little bit more, so when we talk about gut health, it actually relates to this 9-meter long tube that delivers food from entry all the way to exit. So this 9 meters that we all have coiled up in each and every one of us is gut health. And obviously the fact that, the trillions of bacteria live there has brought the fame to it. But we've known for a long time that along that 9 meters is where not only do we digest food, so if you don't have a good gut lining, no matter how healthy the food you put into your body is, you can't absorb those nutrients to feed your skin, your hair, your brain, all that sort of stuff. So digestion, obvious one. Immunity though, 70% of our immune cells live along that 9-meter digestive tract.
No way.
Yeah. So it's really, I guess, those 3 elements, digestion, immunity, and obviously this new discovery around those trillions of microbes that has kind of made us get really excited about gut health.
Amazing. And what does good gut health look like? Because if you were to ask me what's my gut health like, I don't know what the answer would be. Would I tell you how many times I'm pooing?
Yeah.
Would I tell you if I feel tired? Would I tell you if I have bloating? I have no idea.
Yeah, look, well, historically, it was very much like, unless you've got gut symptoms, you must have good gut health. So that used to be like the predictor, right?
Okay.
But now, of course, we've discovered that these trillions of bacteria are doing things like talking to our brain, regulating our hormones like estrogen, doing so many things in the body that actually the definition of what good gut health looks like has really expanded, right? So when I was actually writing my first book, because people ask me this question all the time, I was like, how can I give them a measure? Right. So I came up with this 10-question assessment, and it's still very valid, today. So completely free to complete. So I get people to fill it out, where it scales you from 0 to 20 and asks questions like, yes, digestive symptoms, but also how often you're getting sick. Are you on a restrictive diet? Are you taking medications? How are you sleeping? How stressed are you? Those sorts of things, which actually we
Mm.
start to get a better idea of where your gut health sits.
Wow. So it's not just around your digestion and what we typically thought before, it's actually around so many other things. I guess it's a bit confusing though for people, isn't it? Because aren't those symptoms linked to so many other health conditions as well?
Yeah, 100%. I think this is where a lot of the myths can come, where some people are saying, any issue is down to your gut, like everything is about your gut. And,
Right.
as a scientist, I'm like, obviously so passionate about the gut and do my PhD in it, but there are limitations, right? So just because you nourish your gut doesn't mean you're going to get rid of all depression or your skin's going to look amazing. Like there's other elements like genetics and things that come into play.
Right.
But to be honest, there is, quite convincing scientific evidence out there that if you start to nourish this inner community, actually you probably will start to feel more energized, have a lower risk of mental health issues, feel like, your hormones are in a better place because actually so many of the things that we thought human cells were doing, actually we've discovered these bacteria are doing. So
Wow.
they're actually really quite powerful. And I find this area so empowering. I think it has to be the best word because, we can't change our genetics. We can't, go back in time and,
Right.
get different parents, right? But we can change the types of microbes that are living in our gut and what they're doing. And
Okay.
that therefore gives us a lot of power to control, our future health and longevity even.
Well, I have so many questions. I think the first question I really want to ask you is what's the exact link between mental health and our gut? Does our gut actually impact our mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's this two-way communication that occurs between the gut and the brain.
Right.
So a lot of people have heard of things like the gut-brain axis, right?
Yes.
And one of those pathways is the fact we have these, hundreds of millions of nerves which kind of innervate the gut and kind of feed into it, right? But we also know that the bacteria in our gut can produce chemicals when we eat, they digest food, they produce chemicals, and some of them can get into our blood and then pass that blood-brain barrier to kind of, coordinate thoughts in our brain and how
Okay.
we act.
Hmm.
And then also there's the vagus nerve a lot of people have heard about where the bacteria again it's kind of like a mobile phone. They'll be like, hey, I want to talk to the brain. So they zip up messages via that vagus nerve and kind of communicate to our brain that way. So yeah, there is, really quite strong evidence out there. And I think from a what can we actually do about this for mental health? Because I'm sure you've seen the
Yeah.
stats, like 1 in 4 of us are going to have a mental health event each and every year.
Hmm.
Like it's wild. The clinical trials have actually been really quite impressive where going on a gut boosting diet, gut nourishing diet has actually resulted in significant improvements in people's mental health. People who actually
Really?
have diagnosed depression, absolutely.
No
Yeah.
way.
So if there's any nerds out there, check out the Smiles trial because that was the first one. That was the first landmark study, which, as a dietitian and nutritionist, it gave me the confidence to be like, you know what? Actually, I can make a meaningful impact on people's mental health. Because obviously, back 15 or so years ago when I was at uni, we got told that maybe food can help a little bit with mental, but let's not overstate it, right?
Right.
And then this study came out really robust and they showed that, yeah, eating more plant diversity, not plants only, oily fish, fermented dairy, all those sorts of things can actually have a clinically measurable improvement in people's mental health. So
Wow.
it's really empowering. Now, I always, when I quote that study, always highlight that everyone stayed on their antidepressant medication. So, because these
Okay.
people had moderate to severe depression. So I wouldn't ever tell someone who's got depression to say, hey, just go cold turkey for a new diet plan. Look
Right.
after your gut. And I think that's some of the dangers on social media. But what I
Hmm.
would say as an additional therapy, focus on nourishing your microbiome. And certainly in my own clinic with the support of the prescribing psychiatrists, we've actually gotten some people who've wanted to come off the antidepressants off them by nourishing their microbiome. So, it
Wow.
really is kind of this new area of starting to take a little bit more control back of our health.
That's amazing. I mean, I've always struggled with my mood during my menstrual cycle. If I were to nourish my body with certain foods, would my mood be affected and would it change?
So that's a really good one. Now, I would say the evidence isn't strong enough to say directly due to hormonal changes, right?
Right.
Now, if we look at the detail of the relationship, we do know actually that our bacteria, there's a certain category called estrabolomes. So if you want to show off and sound really
Love
smart,
it.
there's the estrabolome, which are the microbes which actually help regulate estrogen.
Right.
So they turn the inactive estrogen that we kind of essentially would have pooped out to active estrogen. So it's really, it has an important role on estrogen regulation. And therefore, indirectly, nourishing that microbiome may help with things like mood swings. But I would say the strongest evidence for this gut brain connection has very much been in depression, where following that diet
No
actually
way.
really can help in that way. So I think anyone who's got, any sort of, mood, struggles, then yes, try the gut, focusing on that for 4 weeks and see how you feel. But I guess as a clinician, the strongest evidence, like I said, is really in managing mental health.
Wow, this is
Mm.
amazing. So, I'm vegetarian, so I want you to tell me what gut nourishing foods are great for vegetarians.
Yeah.
But then for the listeners who are at home who eat meat and fish,
Hmm.
what is like a perfect day? What does it look like? Or a
Yeah.
perfect week if we can't
Yeah.
say a
Right.
day?
Yeah.
So, let's start with the vegetarian. What's a gut nourishing vegetarian diet that will help you to alleviate symptoms of depression?
Yeah. So in the study, what they did is put people very much on a Mediterranean style diet,
Right.
right? So Mediterranean diet is literally the diet with the most scientific evidence behind it. So things like extra virgin olive oil should be the main fat,
Wow.
nuts and seeds, your different types of veggies as well as fruit, your whole grains and your legumes. So I actually call it the Super Six. There's 6 different plant-based categories.
Wow.
And I think, even if you look at the government guidelines, right? So they're very focused on eat more fruit and eat more vegetables, but actually they're missing the other 4 of the Super Six. And what we're learning is that each different category provides our gut bacteria with different types of fertilizer. So if you're just fixated on your fruit and veg and not getting your legumes in or your nuts and seeds, you're only going to kind of feed a minority type of bacteria. And
Wow.
actually, our team at King's College in London have actually just received a grant from the government to investigate this concept of plant diversity to see whether they need to change the guidelines, which is now just fixating on fruit and veg. Annoyingly, research takes time,
Yes.
but there is movement to kind of start to learn from the microbiome science and then, take that forward with, recommendations on how we can all live healthier, happier lives.
And give me an example. What would you recommend eating for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? And do you recommend snacking? Is snacking good for your gut?
Yeah, very good one around snacking.
You
So
say yes. I'm a cereal snacker.
you know what? It's very individualized. So it's
Okay,
more important what you're snacking on than snacking or not snacking. The
got it.
only exception to that is if you struggle with constipation. Then
Oh.
actually, if you're struggling, which is like 1 in 7 people,
Hmm.
even, more frequent in women, is that if you're constantly snacking, this movement called the migrating motor complex, which kind of pushes all your food down and gets things moving, doesn't have time to take effect. So every about 90 minutes in the fasted state, this migrator motor complex kind of pushes the food down, right? But if you're constantly snacking,
Yeah.
then actually doesn't have that good movement. Now, if you don't have issues with constipation, that's completely fine. Like I'm a snacker. I snack all the time.
Right.
And as
Not.
long as I'm
Yeah.
snacking on the plants and all that good stuff, it's actually a good thing. Get more fiber in you. But that's the exception if you're struggling with constipation. Just for 4 weeks, reduce down your snacking. Try just your 3 main meals. See if it helps. If not, go back to snacking.
Yeah.
But there is some evidence around that.
So tell me what that ideal meal would look like for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yeah.
What would you recommend people to eat?
Yeah. So you know what I find in clinic is that if I give people a meal plan and
Right.
say, eat that, they might stick to it for a week or whatever, but it doesn't work around their diet and lifestyle. So I'll obviously go through the plan, but I always make the
Right.
caveat.
Tell me what I should
Yeah,
eat.
because people are like, so should I have sweet or savory breakfast? And I'm like, honestly, you need to do what you prefer,
Got it.
but there's tweaks to each. So if you're into more sweet, then yeah, have some porridge, add mixed seeds in. Don't just get your pumpkin seeds or your chia seeds, get the mixed ones because each different
Oh.
type of seed is a different fertilizer for a different type of bacteria, which has got all these skills. So that's kind of the whole principle is
Mm,
you want as many different like little warriors in you. I mean, you can call them a superhero, you can call them a best friend, whatever you want to like
love it.
analogy, depends who you're talking to. Kids
Yeah.
love knowing they got a little pet in them. But feeding that as many different fertilizers, which come from all your different plants, is how you cultivate the best community to look after you in return. So porridge, yeah, some mixed seeds, some mixed nut butter. Don't just get your peanut butter, get the mixed nut butter in there. Some
Oh.
frozen berries, particularly good because of the polyphenols, and that also helps increase blood to the brain. So if you really have got like to focus on something, like an exam or interview or something, then having like a half a cup or a cup of frozen berries or fresh berries actually sort to help with that kind of mental focus there.
I was just about to ask you, why did you say frozen instead of fresh? Because the last time I asked a nutritionist about frozen v fresh food, it turned into a complete media circus. And I asked her, what's the number one thing you would advise? And she said, love your freezer. And she said that because she was talking about people who live in the UK who don't have access to fresh farms.
Yeah.
They don't grow their own fruit in their garden. And she said that if it's frozen when it's fresh and on the day, rather than when it's fresh, it goes on the shelf and la 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 la. People are up in arms about it. They were so, but honestly, I think the clip's got like millions and millions of views and people are still arguing over it. What are your thoughts on frozen fruit or fresh fruit? Which is better for you?
Essentially mix it up, because
Really?
exactly kind of what you heard is that sometimes when it's picked at the source, it's like frozen really quickly, and that can preserve some nutrients. But then we
Right.
know that other nutrients, actually maybe the freezing process isn't as beneficial for them. So
Got it.
why I automatically said frozen is because they're more accessible, right? Like
Yes.
fresh berries are expensive.
Yeah.
So I don't want people to be like, oh, I can't afford berries, they're super expensive, and that's why
Got it.
I went there. But honestly, it's mixing it up.
Okay.
And whatever you're going to have more of.
Makes
you know?
sense. So it's more around making it easy for yourself and something that you're actually going to have rather than creating this fancy recipe, which I think is nice.
Yeah, so maybe, fresh, it might have an extra like 5% of, vitamin C, let's just say.
Got it.
Like 5% in the context of your whole daily diet is nothing.
It's not
So
a
we
big
kind of
deal.
argue, the people are arguing over like negligent amounts of
Yes.
nutrients, right?
Yeah.
So there's your porridge, and then something like kefir, fermented dairy. If you're
Yes.
having dairy, then that's a good one. Fermented dairy is my go-to. So that's breakfast.
Yeah.
Maybe as a snack, you might have a handful of mixed nuts, some dark chocolate, good
Okay.
source of polyphenols, really actually good for the gut-skin axis.
Wow.
There's studies to show that the cocoa, dark chocolate, actually reduces the appearance of wrinkles. There was a placebo-controlled trial showing that. So, yeah.
Amazing.
Dark chocolate, hell yeah.
Right? 85% and above or no?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And watch the caffeine too, because it has quite a lot of caffeine. So not at night if you want to go to bed.
Fine.
More, front load in the day.
Okay.
Then lunch, it can be anything. It could be people whenever I say salad, people are like, ugh, it's so boring. But I always
I
make
love
these
salad.
super six salads, right? So it's got all 6 categories in it. So you've got your different mixed grains. Again, the microwave packs.
Yeah.
Some of them, as long as they've got no extra sauces or additives, are great, right? You get
Right.
4 points, right, from this
Amazing.
pack there. Mixed lettuce leaves, then you get a can of mixed beans again, whether it's got some butter beans and chickpeas. Then, again, it could be a sprinkle of mixed seeds or something like that. Some sourdough in there, kind of mix it up a bit. And if you are...
Tofu?
Yeah, tofu, that's what I was going to say, in terms
God
of
for that.
added protein in there. You can get loads of protein
you
from
can.
plants, right? You don't need animal products. And what I would say, if you don't eat fish, then omega-3 is probably an important one
Okay.
to get via supplements. Because even though you can get certain types of omega-3 in like chia seeds and walnuts, it's not necessarily the most active form of it.
Why do I need omega-3 in my diet?
So omega-3 is really important, not only for your gut health, but your brain, right? So
Oh.
it's such an important one for your mental health. There's a really good evidence of that.
Really?
Yeah. And your heart health as well.
I never take omega-3.
Oh, right. So you don't
And
have
I'm
fish.
vegetarian, no. And I barely have walnuts, and rarely do I have chia seeds.
Okay, well, tomorrow you're on it.
I'm on it.
And I want to hear in a month's time how you're feeling. And it might,
Okay.
yeah. And there's
Really?
so many, because, I'm not like huge on pushing supplements, always food first. But actually, this is one area where if you're not having your 2 serves of oily fish a week, I recommend absolutely you take it. So let's see the before and after.
Okay, I'll tell you. And then for dinner, I would guess say similar to lunch, right? You can make so many different things. That's
Yeah.
fine. I want to talk to you because you said around caffeine. Is coffee good for your gut?
Dun, dun, dun. So this is where I think, again, social, it's a soundbite, so it always confuses people. So the answer is it depends, right? So
Right.
if you have, no gut issues per se, then actually, yeah, having 2 cups of coffee a day has been shown to potentially have a benefit because coffee has got these polyphenols in it. So you think of polyphenols as like another fertilizer
Okay.
for our microbiome. So it's got benefits to it.
Right.
But the other thing that coffee's got in it is the caffeine, right? So if you've got gut issues, we know that caffeine can disrupt this gut-brain axis. It can kind of make things move faster and kind of stress out your gut a little bit more. So if you've got, bloating and underlying issues with your gut there, then actually having too much coffee because of the caffeine
Right.
is not great. Now, the other thing, actually, they've done some really great studies looking at the effect of caffeine on cortisol, stress hormone, and have shown that if you're having caffeine, that it also means that, if you have any sort of stressful event, your cortisol spike will be much greater on the days you have caffeine compared to the days you don't have caffeine. So if you are feeling a bit stressy one day,
Right.
don't go and wham yourself full of coffee, because actually it could make it worse. Go decaf, essentially.
So a lot of people talk around coffee poop. So when you have a coffee, you go straight to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Okay, and I have that.
Yeah.
So does that mean I have a bad gut problem?
That's brilliant. Not at all.
Oh.
If it helps activate.
It does.
Yeah, called the mass movement. So there's, all these different types of movements, and we know the mass movement can be activated by some caffeine. So it can be really
Wow.
helpful for some people, right?
Excellent.
So it's not a bad thing like it's ejecting. It just stimulates your gut muscles. But
Right.
for people with things like irritable bowel syndrome, that essentially is this dysfunction between your gut and your brain. Right? So that's what IBS is the gut and brain are not talking well.
Right.
So if you have caffeine, like you said, normally for a lot of people, it can give you that nice kick and get things moving. But when you've got IBS, that caffeine can make the muscles work in a really uncoordinated fashion. Kind of like me on the dance floor, very uncoordinated. So
me
that's
too.
kind of what can happen. So
But what would happen then? Would you go to the bathroom or you wouldn't?
so some people it can cause like mass diarrhea. Other people it can bind them up because, even though you've got the movement in your gut, actually could be pushing food back up the wrong way.
Oh no.
So yeah, caffeine can be amazing for some people, but really detrimental for others. So there is that personalization element there, which is why, messages on social media can be so confusing, because there's the people who are like, I definitely know that's not working for me. And other people are like, I definitely know it is. And that's why everyone's
Right.
like, why? And it's because we react differently.
We're different beings. This
Yeah.
is the thing that we need to keep talking about, is that there really is no one thing that works for everyone. And I really love the guests I have on this podcast because they never tell me. I always try and push, like, what's the one thing that we can do? They're like, there isn't a one thing. And I'm like, good. This is what everyone needs to hear, because I think you see these sound bites and you think, oh, I won't have coffee because it will make me go to the toilet, or I will have coffee because it will. And you just then relate only to one message.
Yeah.
I want to talk around how many times a day we should be pooing,
Yeah.
because I don't know how many times a day it is considered normal to go to the toilet. So how often should we be going to the bathroom for
Yeah.
a number 2?
Very good question. So what we classify as normal is as little as 3 times a week and as much as 3 times a day. So if you're going more than 3 times a day or less
Right.
than 3 times a week, then you probably need to go and have a chat to your doctor and find out what's going on there. But actually, as you can see, that's quite a lot of
3
variation,
times
right?
a week?
Yeah. Yeah, for some people, they've just got slower moving guts and their volume of food is not as great. And for them, they feel fine. They've got no issues,
No
Whereas
way.
other people, it probably sounds like you and myself
Yeah, I'm
included.
literally like, what?
I'm like,
But I
once
eat
a
a lot.
day is, yeah.
Once a day is normal.
No, as in
Oh.
like for other people, actually, if they thought of having a day without a poop, they might be
Right.
like, ugh, no thank you.
The
So
worst.
again, there's that individualization there. But again, we do know the cautions. If you're going more than 3 times a day,
Yes.
you need to go get checked out.
Really?
Less than 3 times a day, again,
Okay.
go and get checked out.
It's interesting because I think that sometimes when I travel, I can't go to the toilet that day
Yeah.
and I feel horrific. But I also have a very large appetite. So if I wasn't going to the bathroom 3 times a day, I would say I'm on the upper end. Then I don't know how I would feel, because my food would just feel so bloated and I would feel like very uncomfortable in my stomach. Bloating is a really interesting phenomenon, I think, because whilst the more and more I do this podcast, the more I realize how much bloating has been almost capitalized on, because we've all suffered with bloating for a really, really long time. And now all I constantly see is like, this is anti-bloat, that's going to be good for your bloating. Talk to me about bloating, because what is bloating? What are foods that help us? What are foods that are terrible for our bloating?
Yeah. So it's a really good one, and I couldn't agree more. In fact, what we know is a little bit of bloating after a high fiber meal is a sign of a well-fed community gut bacteria, right? So essentially, bloating is a sensation. It's when you feel like you've got a balloon shoved inside your gut. Now, that's actually different to another word called distension, whereas some people have got that food baby, right? And actually, it's
Oh.
important to understand, do you just get that sensation, but actually you don't need to unzip your pants? Or actually, do you get that sensation and the potted tummy like you're pregnant? Or actually, some people
Right.
just get the potted tummy. So it's kind of, in clinic, I would go through the nuances of, okay, so do you have just bloating on its own, that feeling, or actually do you get the food baby, so to speak? But like I said, a little bit of bloating is normal after a high fiber meal. And the reason for that is that when we eat fiber, so everyone's heard of fiber, right? It's in all
Yes.
our plant-based foods. We know we need more of it. We never really understood why fiber was so important until we discovered about the microbiome, right? Because human cells don't have the enzymes to break it down. So when we eat fiber, it goes through that 9-meter tract, mostly undigested. And then it makes its way into that final 1.5 meters of the large intestine, the final part of the gut. And that's where it works its magic, in that it's fertilizer for those microbes.
Wow.
So now we're starting to go, oh, right. So people who live longer and are happy and all that sort of stuff, we knew it was about the fiber. We didn't understand why. It's because it nourishes, fertilizes the microbiome, which does all this amazing stuff. So when they eat the fiber, they just produce naturally a waste product, which is a little bit of gas. Completely inert, completely normal, right? Now, interestingly, a lot of that gas actually then goes across our gut lining into our blood and we breathe it out. A little bit comes out the back end as wind. Now, for some people, though, where their gut lining is super stressed because maybe they've got a bit of IBS or they're just having a really stressy day or are wearing really high-waisted pants and that traps the gas in,
Really?
Yeah.
High-waisted jeans trap your gas in.
can put more stress on your gut. So if you're having a bloated day, it's a thing called tight pants syndrome. So if you're constantly wearing tight pants, that can stress your gut out. Because like this big muscle, right? It's like putting pressure on it.
course.
And therefore it doesn't diffuse across your gut lining and that kind of gets trapped in your gut. And when it gets trapped in your gut, then obviously that can result in that feeling of that pressure and those, remember the gut-brain axis, those hundreds of millions of nerves which feed in, it kind of stretches them and you get cramping and all this sort of uncomfortableness, right? So in terms of, the issue and the solution, if you have, a high fiber meal, get a little bit bloated, don't stress about it. Just be like, oh yeah, cool, just fed my microbes, right?
Right.
Yeah. But if the bloating is ongoing, then there's things we need to think about, right? So we need to be first like, okay, well, let's be safe. Let's check, with your doctor that you don't have, for example, celiac disease.
Right.
Now, celiac disease affects, 1 in 100 people, and there's 500,000 people living in the UK undiagnosed with celiac disease. So loads of people are just got some bloating. So it really is important that you go to your GP, you get checked, and it's just a simple blood test. But for that blood test to be valid, you need to have gluten in your diet, which is something that I sadly see in clinic all the time, where they'll get a negative, like, oh, I don't have celiac, result back. But actually that's because they've cut the gluten out of their diet, right? So you need to, before you intervene in your diet, always go and get checked for celiac.
But why can't I just cut the gluten out of my diet and then not get tested for celiac?
Yeah, very good question. So if you want to go down that path, what I would say is you then need to be very committed to always being super strict, right? Because
Right.
if you actually do have celiac disease, even a crumb of bread, because you're using the same toaster as your housemate or whatever, can do actual damage to your gut.
Why?
Yeah, because you've got an autoimmune condition, right? So it sees a gluten as a toxin. So even teeny bits that get in you,
No way.
yeah. So you can have all of this inflammation. And even the worst thing is that some people with celiac disease, even though there's this, inflammation that's occurring, they actually don't get that bad of symptoms when they have gluten. So, we do need to be really careful and we need to get, a proper diagnosis.
This is a stupid question.
Not at all, never.
Why is it bad if I damage my gut? So if I've got celiac disease at home, so I have a friend who was
Yeah.
actually diagnosed
Okay.
and they do not stick to the gluten-free diet because they don't have the symptoms that bad. So what they said is, I've been feeling rubbish for a long time. I'm going to go get checked, constantly ill, feeling really unwell. Can't wait to send this to them. They know who they are. And they got checked and they were told that they need to be gluten-free. Now, the problem with this right now is because there are so many people who are being gluten-free and there's an entire realm on TikTok and social media being like, you're so annoying that you're vegan and gluten-free and there's something wrong with you and we never had this problem in our age and this generation is so stupid. There's always an issue with someone's problem or health or whatever. People feel that they are being difficult if they say they're gluten-free because obviously when you go to someone's house or when you go out for dinner, you're always like, can I have a gluten-free option? And it can be really annoying. Now, this person hasn't stuck to their gluten-free diet. Why is that a bad thing?
Yeah, look, firstly, I empathize with them because I completely understand, people do feel like they're putting others out, but it's so, so important that people realize, no, this is a condition that needs to be carefully managed because it increases risk of stomach cancers,
Really?
osteoporosis, because if your gut is inflamed, you're not absorbing all your nutrition, right? So, you're not getting the calcium and you're not getting, absorbing your omega-3 and your vitamin D, all this. So there's so many things that, can result from having gluten when you have celiac disease. So it is actually
Wow.
really important that everyone takes it seriously. And it's exactly what, your friend has found is that it can be really hard because people are thinking it as a trendy thing, but it's
Mm.
not when you've got celiac disease. It is a serious condition that you need to manage. And unfortunately, there's vaccine studies trying to look at a cure in the future, but there is currently no cure. So you do need to be really, really focused on that.
Wow. I mean, I think what you've just said, that's really powerful, actually. And I think this could be applied in all areas of life, not just in gut health, is even if you don't experience the most severe symptoms of something, it doesn't mean that you don't have it. And I think we look at people who have mental health and we
Mhm.
think, well, they're going out, they're having a good time,
Mm.
they look like they're happy in their relationship. But underneath all of that, it doesn't mean that they're not suffering. And I think this is so important to recognize because we're constantly comparing ourselves to other people without understanding the full reality of the mental health conditions that they're probably living with.
Mhm.
And you look at somebody who's perhaps got this gluten intolerance and you think, oh, well, when they have a bite of that cake, they're not really being affected by it. But you can't see what's actually happening to their body.
Mhm.
And this is so relevant in life, right? With anything, you can be horrible to someone. And if they take it and they're like, okay, I'm shrugging it off, you don't know what that's doing to their mental health. You don't know what that's doing to them inside. And so I think that's a really powerful point you just made, actually, is even if your symptoms aren't as apparent as they should be, or you think that they should be, doesn't mean you're not suffering.
Yeah. I mean, it's, well said in terms of there are so many other, like mental health, obviously,
Yeah.
one, but another inflammatory bowel disease, right? Like,
Right.
1 in 123 people have inflammatory bowel disease, and it is a very debilitating condition when you've got a
Really?
flare, but it's invisible to the naked eye because it's like, oh, you look fine. But actually, it can be, making people not be able to go to work and all that sort of stuff. So
Mm.
it's, a real thing. And I think empathy and understanding and getting the
Yes.
right information out can really help people feel more confident to, say to a friend, like, I'd love to come, but actually I've got a flare of my IBD at the moment. So, can we do something closer to my home sort of thing and
Right.
stuff like that. So yeah,
Yes.
there's a lot that of people are, going through and they just can't really speak about it. So
So I want to go back to bloating
yeah.
because I do think that everyone that I know suffers with bloating.
Yeah.
What are 3 things that we can do to reduce bloating or to help heal our bodies?
Yeah. So firstly, like we said, rule out celiac disease,
Yes.
right? And then there is these 22 different triggers that I commonly see in clinic. So I actually developed a bloating masterclass because bloating is the most common thing that I get asked about. It's one that I can't give a simple answer to because, like I said, there's 22 different common triggers. So everyone's is different. Some people might be the fact that actually fruit is amazing, right? But they might be having more than 2 pieces of fruit in one episode, and therefore the fructose, the fruit sugar, overwhelms their ability to absorb it, and then they kind of poop it out, and that creates more fermentation, therefore more bloating. So for some people, that's the issue. For other people, it might be things like the sugar alcohols, things like polyols, which are in chewing gum, but also a lot of protein powders actually have these different, sweeteners in them, and our body's not very good at absorbing them. And again, the bacteria have a frenzy, produce these big pockets of gas that causes bloating. For other people, it can be high fat foods. Other people, it literally can be the fiber. And I think
Right.
this is a really important one is where you have that stressed gut. You go load up on fiber because you've heard from us that fiber's great, right? And then you get really bad symptoms. And that's essentially because of 2 things. One is that you've got a bit of a damaged gut. And the second thing is that you've just loaded in too much fiber all at once and haven't allowed your gut to kind of learn to digest it efficiently. So I like to
Wow.
explain it kind of like when you're going to the gym, right? If you went from not going to the gym at all to like trying to lift some crazy heavy weight, you do that. The next day you probably can't walk. You're like, oh my God, I'm in so much pain. And often
True.
people actually celebrate that, right? They're like,
Yeah.
hell yeah, I worked hard at the gym.
Yes.
That's the same thing with fiber. So if you go from very little fiber and then you have this massive high fiber meal, then yeah, you're going to get pops. The microbes aren't used to it. They're going to have this frenzy of, celebrating and going a bit wild. So you'll get some gut symptoms. So try not to freak out about it, but that's what's happened essentially is your
Got it.
microbes have binged on it. If you want to have high fiber diet because it's linked to things like better mental health, all the rest of it, and not the symptoms, then just go slow and steady.
Got it.
So it's literally, having an extra half a serve of some sort of plant per day, per week. Second week, increase it by another half and see how you're feeling with that. So you need to slowly train your gut to become fiber fit.
Wow.
From that perspective. And for some people, in clinic, and that's what I talk about in the Bloating Masterclass, is we would really reduce down the fiber to like half what their normal is. So quite low for 2 weeks. Allow their gut to just de-stress, that gut lining just to kind of get some headspace. And then slowly, start to reintroduce like legumes. Chickpeas is one that people often struggle with.
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So literally don't cut them out and be like, I've got an intolerance, because it's very rare to have an intolerance to chickpeas. It's the fact that they have these fibers which are really rapidly fermented by the gut bacteria, which is a good thing. It's called a prebiotic in chickpeas, right? But if you're not used to it, it can cause havoc. So what I get people to do is just literally start with 1 tablespoon of chickpeas every day. Second week, 2 tablespoons, and just get a can. So it's like you're not having to like cook and do all this stuff.
Yeah.
Put it, in a Tupperware container in the fridge, and then whatever you're having, just 1 tablespoon. And it teaches your microbiome to efficiently digest those prebiotics and start to love them.
Wow.
So we need to kind of have that approach to really diversify our diet and get the full benefits of fiber without the symptoms.
Well, I actually have a lot of vegetables in my diet.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just have like a vegetable bowl with like hummus, so like chickpeas, and then I have some rice and then tofu. And often when I have loads of vegetables, when I have like a roast or something, my stomach does bloat a lot. But I don't really care because I know that it's because I've had lots and lots of fiber, so it doesn't hurt me.
Yeah.
But you mentioned something really important there about prebiotic. I hear this word thrown around all the time. Probiotic and prebiotic. What on earth does it mean? And what is a prebiotic and what's a probiotic? And how is it good for me?
Yeah, it's so confusing, right? Because literally one letter difference.
Yeah.
Like, why do we do this in science? We just love confusing people, essentially. So probiotics is those live bacteria that when used in the right way can be really beneficial, right?
Okay.
Prebiotics is a certain fibers which fertilize the microbiome, like we spoke about in chickpeas and stuff. So things like inulin and GOS are words you might hear are prebiotics.
Never heard of those words.
Yeah.
Okay,
good. In case there's any science lovers in there.
We're going to be like kimchi or, kefir.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, I've heard of those.
Yeah. So these are ingredients that are called prebiotics, right? So if you're getting your Super 6, like we said, across the day, you don't need to worry about taking a prebiotic supplement generally, right? Because you're getting many prebiotics from your food. Now, probiotics, I think, is a really important one, and this is what I did my PhD in, is that this whole concept that we've been led to believe that we need to take a probiotic every day for good gut health is not science-backed. Like, literally, there's no clinical trial out there to show that a probiotic, these good bacteria, will improve your overall gut health. To have good gut health, you have the plant diversity and fermented foods, right?
Wow.
Probiotics are very indication specific. Now, what I mean by that is kind of like if you have iron deficiency, you don't go and take a vitamin D supplement and expect your iron to improve because they're different nutrients. They do different things. The same goes with probiotics and bacteria, right? So when we talk about probiotics, they're all different types of bacterial strains is kind of the scientific name. So if you've got a specific issue, you need to make sure you're taking the right strain at the right time in the right way. You need to get very therapeutic with it. In fact, the World Gastroenterology Organization, so this is kind of the leaders in gut health, right, from the scientific perspective, they actually have these guidelines on probiotics. And they say in it, if you have to go on antibiotics for whatever reason, you should take the bacterial strain called LGG, and you should take that at 10 billion units twice a day throughout your antibiotic period.
Okay.
Right? So there actually is these protocols that we should be having, which actually reduces your risk of things like antibiotic-associated diarrhea compared to placebo by around 70%. And that's something like 1 in 3 people struggle with typically when they have antibiotics. So we know probiotics, when used in the right way, can be really effective. And also we know that things like, for our immune support and, cold and flu, for example, bacterial vaginosis and thrush and colic in babies. So there's these areas where as a clinician, I'm like, there's really good evidence. People need to get very specific with their probiotics for these areas. But for a lot of the other areas, just eat the plant diversity, eat the fermented foods, and you're good to go, right?
Right. So, as a vegetarian, I'm someone who doesn't have omega-3. I wouldn't say I have a lot of iron. I think my iron is low. I think my vitamin D is very low because I
Yeah.
got tested in the summer and it was 17 after my 5-day holiday in 40 degrees. So, what would you recommend for me?
Yeah, right. So if you are commonly kind of getting cold and flu and stuff like that, then I would definitely recommend a probiotic, a live bacteria formulation with BB12 and LGG. They're two different types of bacteria. You would take it at 10 billion units each per day.
Okay. Is
And
there
you
a
would
specific time?
know, ideally with food,
Okay.
kind of helps reduce the acidity so they survive a little bit longer. And you would take that during periods of where actually your immune system's being stretched. Maybe it's like, you're around a lot of sick people, in the pubs or
Got
on the
it.
tube and stuff like
Mm.
that. Or maybe you're going through a period where actually you're really stressed and you feel like you could be quite run down. So then I would recommend that. Otherwise, what I would say is you need to take your vitamin D supplement, you need to take your omega-3 supplement, and, have your plant diversity, have your
Mm.
fermented foods, and that's you done, right?
Okay.
So we need to think about them kind of like medication, get very prescriptive with them, take the right strain at the right time in the right
Mm.
way.
What you've just said is really important about taking supplements at the right time, because someone came over last week and I took my iron supplement at night and they were like, you shouldn't take that because you don't have loads of energy. And I had absolutely no idea. So I know you've created smart strains. Talk to me a little bit about that. Why is it so important to know exactly what you're taking and at what time you should be taking it?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's been quite a long journey when it came to developing smart strains. And like I said, I did my PhD in probiotics over a decade ago, right? And from that PhD and many other researchers around the world, we've all kind of come to the same conclusion: is different bacteria do different things.
Right.
So we have these amazing clinical trials out there which shows that certain formulations of bacteria, certain types of bacteria at certain doses in certain formats, whether it's powder or liquid, actually can have really powerful benefits in certain indications, like for your immune system, for a fussy baby, for your vaginal microbiome, and if you have to go on antibiotics. So we know that there's powerful, research behind these, and there's clinical guidelines that say we should take this formulation at this time, all that sort of stuff, right? Those probiotics didn't exist on the market. So here I was in clinic, dealing with people who had gone on antibiotics, for example, and I knew that a certain probiotic could help alongside the antibiotics, but it didn't exist on the market. So I was like, what do I say to the person? Yeah, actually, we know that certain types can help, but I can't tell you to take a brand because there's nothing out there.
Wow.
So it's been a long process where, I had rejected by 11 different companies where I was going to, because I didn't want to start my own business. I'm like, God, I've got enough going on at King's, right? And I went to them, I was like, can we follow the guidelines? Can we change some of the strains to match the indication and have this powerful benefit? And they were like, that's going to be too much effort, but we'd love for you to brand slap and, say this is good. I'm like, no, it's not in line with what the guidelines are saying we should be giving people at certain times to have this benefit. So, it's this wild, state of play where actually there is no scientific evidence to take a probiotic for general gut health. Like we said, it's having the diverse plants, the fermented foods for general gut health. But for certain need states, like for your vaginal microbiome, if it starts to feel unbalanced, for a fussy baby, for your immune system, or if you go on antibiotics, they're the 4 areas with the strongest scientific evidence to take a specific formulation.
Wow.
So that's why, I invented smart strains, because no one else would listen to me. And, the response from healthcare professionals, because they know about the guidelines, they're like,
Wow.
thank God we can now finally match the formulations proven in clinical trials to our patients' needs.
This is amazing. I mean, you mentioned a few times a fussy baby. Talk to me a little bit about that.
One of the areas, again, where there's really good scientific evidence out there. So in fact, the world leading organizations for pediatrics, for babies, actually have said if your baby has colic, then they should take 1 billion of these bacteria called BB12. So that's a strain, that's a type of bacteria.
The baby should take it, not the mother.
No, not the mother.
Oh,
Yeah. So
okay.
Bub should be taking it. In the clinical trials, randomized placebo-controlled trials. So half of them got the placebo, which essentially is just a fake intervention. So it's a liquid that makes mum and dad think they're still having something to make sure there's no like, oh, I feel better because I'm taking something, right? So this is the
Right.
best type of study, is to give people a
Love
placebo
it.
and the other half of people actually get the real intervention, but they look the same, so no one knows which is which,
Got
right?
it.
Even the researchers often are blinded, which is the best type. And they show that those who had that BB12 bacteria had a significant reduction, like, over double the reduction in crying and fussing compared to placebo.
No way.
Yeah. And also those who had the BB12 had an increase in daily sleep by over an hour compared to baseline. So like I said, there's these randomized control trials, really good evidence out there. The formulations just weren't on the market. So it is,
Wow.
yeah, it's mind-blowing that can happen. So that's what I guess I'm so passionate about, and what I'm, why I kind of got into social media, right? Because I'm a scientist. I love the science.
Yes, I
But
can tell.
this
You're like the most scientific person I've ever spoken to. Sometimes I'm like so confused with what you're saying, and then I'm like, you make sense.
takes a while to go through the
Yeah, I
motions.
love it
but
though.
essentially, I kind of recently have been psychoanalyzing myself of, like, why did I go through those 11 rejections and like keep going. I lost my sister when I was young, and she was 5 to a medical mistake, right? And
So
obviously mistakes
sorry.
happen. This, it's reality. But it kind of instilled in me this deep responsibility to ensure that if we've got the science to do better, we use it. And I think that's what really got me. I was like, we have the science. Like,
Amazing.
all the scientists are agreeing on this. Why are we not giving this to people? Why are we not doing better? Like, there was just this huge disconnect. And that's what, essentially I'm all about, is like
It's amazing.
making sure that translation happens so people live happier and healthier lives.
I love that. Honestly, I think it's amazing what you're doing. I want to talk a little bit, because you were speaking so much around babies. There are a lot of millennials right now who are trying to have kids. How do they look after their gut so that their babies are impacted in the right way? Because there's a big link, isn't there, to our gut and our baby's gut when we're pregnant, or even after we're pregnant, because we're breastfeeding.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Or
I don't want to
pumping.
put pressure on
Yeah.
new mums anymore, right? But there is really good scientific evidence out there that mum's diet actually does impact not only, bub's health, but also bub's preferences, of taste preferences when they're delivered, right?
What?
Yeah. It's amazing where they've actually done studies and shown that, mums who've had like things like garlic, when baby comes out, it's more garlic accepting of the flavor if their mum had it compared to if they didn't. So it is incredible how the body works. And like I said, I don't want to put extra pressure on, but like morning sickness and things like that, it's tough. But what I
Yes.
say, where you can, sneak in those extra plants. So things like egg frittata, I pretty much lived on that when I was having
Really?
morning sickness, and add in the butter beans, all the roast veg, all that sort of stuff. So wherever you can, smoothies. Don't just have the fruit in there. Get some frozen cauliflower. You can't even taste it. It kind of like all blends up and it makes it creamy, the frozen
No
cauliflower.
way.
Yeah.
Frozen cauliflower in a
Yeah.
smoothie?
Honestly, give it a try.
I might actually.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
I never thought of that
Yeah.
one.
So it's like all the ways to add plants in, particularly if you're unwell, that actually will start to have an impact on babies' health.
And what about when you're pregnant? Are there things that you can eat that are going to help you with your pregnancy in relation to your gut?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, just the basics of
Okay.
the super six, getting them in every day if you can. Oily fish. So if you're not having the oily fish, then
Yes.
actually omega-3 is even more important when you are pregnant for baby's brain development. And even things like choline we get from eggs. So if you're 100% plant-based, no animal products, then actually there's a few nutrients you need to be conscious of supplementing, because baby really needs that for their brain and their whole body development.
For the perfect gut,
Yeah.
would you recommend someone on a plant-based diet?
I wouldn't. No. The thing,
No.
yeah. So the thing is,
I thought that answer would be 100. If this was a multiple choice question,
Yeah.
I would have picked yes after everything you've told me.
Yeah.
You'd recommend meat?
So oily fish
Okay.
and fermented dairy, not meat, not like
So
a
like
red
kefir?
meat.
What's fermented dairy?
Yeah,
Kefir?
kefir, yogurt, quality
Okay.
cheeses, those sorts of things,
So
right?
cheese is good for your gut.
So quality cheeses, aged cheeses, not like the
Baby Bell.
the spreads, ultra processed ones with all these extra additives in it.
Right.
And actually, I mean, I think it's important one to talk about additives at some stage, because
Yes.
additives, when we talk about supplements, are in so many, not just foods, but supplements. And I think people are becoming more aware of looking at ultra processed foods,
Yes.
their ingredient labels, but they're not thinking about their supplements.
talk to me about additives, because actually I follow somebody called the Natural Supermarket. And what she is she's basically created this online store of totally natural products, right? And she was talking to me, she uploaded a post around Barocca. Now, I used to take Barocca all the time. And when she took a photo of the back of it, I had like 25 ingredients. I have never in my life looked at the ingredients of Barocca. In fact, I always said when I have children, I would give them Barocca and tell them it was Fanta, because my parents tried to scam me and they did not get past me, but I thought I will scam my kids to do that. Now, when I saw that, I was totally shocked. And now I've become one of those really paranoid people that's constantly looking at the supplements, but I don't know what to look out for. What is an additive in a supplement and what's bad for you in a supplement? What should we be looking out for?
Yeah, it's a really good question, right? So there's, close to 400 different types of additives that have been approved as safe, right? So they're called GRAS. And, all of the safety data was done before we understood about the gut microbiome. So it was all tested on human cells and being like, oh yeah, that's not going to, cause cancer or do any harm. But actually now we appreciate we have this inner community of these trillions of microbes, which actually are really important for our health and well-being. The governments are actually starting to get us to retest the safety. And actually our team at King's literally has just released a world-first clinical trial looking at food additive emulsifiers. So these are ones that start with E400s typically. And what we looked at is particularly people with Crohn's disease. So it's a type of inflammatory bowel disease. And based on pilot studies, there were some rumors that actually maybe it could make Crohn's disease worse. And what we actually did find is that going on a low emulsifier diet compared to a standard emulsifier containing diet actually significantly improved not just their symptoms, but their inflammation, which was quite mind-blowing because up until, recently it was very much like, just medication only, diet has no role, despite patients always saying, I think something in my diet is like triggering me. So what I say is I don't want people to go, I don't want to be fear-mongering, right? Because a lot of additives are safe and they're fine. And actually they can help, like ascorbic acid, sounds scary, vitamin C. Nothing to worry about, helps preserve food on the shelves and stuff like that.
Okay.
But what I would say is we're starting to reassess the safety and starting to think actually some of these additives might not be great. So at the moment, if you have Crohn's disease, what I would say is, just be cautious of the amount of emulsifiers, those E400 foods that you're having in your diet.
Oh my gosh.
And we need to do more studies to look at, okay, so for those who have a genetic susceptibility to Crohn's disease, like what does it mean to them and things like that. So there are, more and more reasons just to be a bit savvy. So a lot of, sadly, probiotic brands on the market have got emulsifiers in them. Baby probiotics have got emulsifiers in them. It's like so frustrating to see these products on the market. And the thing is, these are not essential ingredients because I've, produced them without it, right? And they've got, shelf stability, all of that sort of stuff has been confirmed. So they're being added and maybe it makes them a little bit cheaper or easier to make, but they're unnecessary.
Oh my gosh.
So I think we just need to be a little bit savvy about what we're having. And I mean, the same with a lot of these artificial sweeteners.
Yes.
It's still a bit of a we're unsure space, but there has been some studies to show that it does kind of disrupt your microbiome in some people more than others. So again, we just need to be careful, and it's probably not a case of, you can have your cake and eat it too.
Is aspartame really bad for you?
So again, it comes down to what does really bad mean. So it's not, you hear online that it causes cancer.
Thank God.
That there's no, strong evidence out there that it's doing that. But it does seem to, disrupt the microbiome to some degree.
Right.
And what that means, we need to do further clinical trials on. So what I would say, if you're addicted to foods that, contain a lot of aspartame, then what I would say is, can you not just reduce by one a day? Don't go cold turkey. Reduce by one a day and think, I'm not just going to, cut it out and then just have less. Can't you have some, fizzy water with some frozen berries and some mint in it? So you get the flavor, get the buzz that we all love, but also you get the polyphenols from the berries.
And kombucha. So I love Coke Zero, okay? I don't think, if it was my death row meal, I will have Coke Zero, and I still have it every week. Yeah. However, I don't have it every day, and generally in the weekday, if I do fancy a fizzy drink, I'll have Trip, which is really natural. It's just sparkling water. Please tell me that's okay. Please don't look at me and tell me it's not. And then the other one is kombucha. Are those two okay alternatives?
I mean, I just prefer just to have, the fizzy water and the whole
Okay.
fruit in it, because you're going to have that additive benefit of the
Okay.
polyphenols, right? But if it's one step better for you, then
Okay.
you go for that. What I would say
Right.
about kombucha, I'm a huge fan of kombucha, right? But I did a post on it actually. There are so many frauds in this space around kombucha that they're not legit kombuchas. Like,
Really?
yeah, some companies actually add vinegar in instead of actually doing the fermentation process. Because when our
No
bacteria
way.
ferment sugar, they, produce vinegar, and that's why you get a little bit of a, buzz
Yes.
from it. Whereas companies are like, fermentation is way too expensive, way too time consuming. Let's just add some vinegar and trick people. And then other ones which say, sugar-free, like, whoa, but actually to make kombucha, you need a bit of sugar. But the thing is, the microbes eat most of it. So traditional
it.
kombucha is actually, quite low in sugar compared to others, but it's not sugar-free. So, they add artificial sweetness
Oh
in to get the
no.
sugar-free claim. So there's, we do
I'll have to
need to
ask
be,
you which is
yeah.
so what's the best kombucha on the market actually? I'm not going to ask you that off camera. You tell me. What's the best brand of kombucha on the market?
So typically going to a Whole Food store
Okay.
and looking at the ones with like the floaty bits on top, because that usually means they
Oh.
really have been fermented.
Okay.
Um,
Momo, that's a good one, isn't it?
yeah, that's a decent one.
Okay.
Yeah, because it is really tricky to mass produce legit kombuchas, and therefore it's unlikely to be in the main supermarkets. And it
Wow.
is expensive to make, so you need to be
Yes.
conscious of the price point.
You talked a lot about looking at the back of products. And I'm a weird one because it depends what mood you catch me. And sometimes I'll be eating a burger and chips, and the next day I'll be like assessing all the food. I'm very weird. Anyway, I have been feeling very bloated recently, and also just a little bit. I don't want to say that I've put on weight because people are going to attack me and be like, you're not fat. I'm not saying I'm fat, but
Yeah.
I have definitely put on a little bit of, like, I'm looking at my arms and my legs and I'm like, interesting. I realized I was drinking, I'm not going to say the brand, but I was drinking barista oat milk 2 times a day because I'm obsessed with matcha. And I don't want to ask you a question around matcha. If it's good for you, great. If it's not, tell me another time. Tell me in 5 years. I've cut out too many things today, but I love matcha, particularly with barista oat milk. Now, having 2 of those a day, I realised that, maybe I'm feeling a bit bloated. It's kind of like having a latte twice a day. It's a lot of milk. And on top of it, you're having all of these E numbers and all these things in it. Anyway, so I decided to cut out this one brand. And I said, I'm going to have Plenish, which is only 3 ingredients, really clean. I went to the supermarket this morning. They didn't have Plenish. So there was this organic oat milk. And I thought, let me have a look at it. I look at the back of the ingredients and it says organic oats, 12%, organic rapeseed oil. Now, is rapeseed oil bad for you or not?
It's fine.
It's fine.
Yeah.
So I was like, I thought that too. So I was like, maybe that's fine. Then I saw potassium carbonate and I thought, what is potassium carbonate? So weirdo me gets my phone out, I Google it and it's like, it's an alkaline. So I was like, oh, that's good. It alkalizes the body. Then I continue to read it and it said it's used in soap. Now, at that point, I got so freaked out. I was like, forget it. I'll forget my matcha. I'm not having it. I put it down. I went home and I had a cup of tea instead. Is potassium carbonate bad for you? And are these barista oat milks bad for you?
So it's a really good question, right? And what I would say is that, because a lot of people are like, cow's milk versus, plant milk, like which is the best one, right?
Right.
And what I would say is it really comes down to personal preference. We know that cow's milk is a really good source of calcium. So
Okay.
we know that a lot of people need calcium for things like reducing osteoporosis risk and stuff like that. It's also a decent source of protein.
Yeah.
For some people, it's great. I personally prefer to have fermented dairy, so things like kefir, because
Okay.
actually when you add the microbes, they kind of change the proteins and the fat molecules to be a little bit more bioactive and thought to have benefits, right? But I also have plain cow's milk. But then I also have, plant milk because I actually like the barista version.
Really?
Yeah, in like my coffee, it has that
Creamy
creaminess,
taste,
right?
yes.
So what I would say is that they're not bad for you. They're not like some sort of toxin. And I know you
Oh.
see a lot of these things like, it's in soap and all that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. But like, it's nothing to stress her up. What I would say though, if that's your main source of milk, is you do need to make sure it's fortified with things like calcium. Because so many people I see in clinic are, going 100% plant-based and actually are missing out on their calcium. And then in their 40s, they're like, osteoporosis risk is real. And like, I think when we're younger, we feel like we're invincible. But if you're in your 40s and actually you're breaking your leg and, you can't go to the gym, do the things that you love, like
Yeah.
it's a real thing that we need to be conscious of. So it's kind of like just being cautious of what we're replacing when we're cutting out foods, what we're replacing it with, and making sure we're not like, cutting off our nose to spite our face in some ways.
But a lot of the time, look, if I go to my if you go to any coffee shop in London, generally they're all using Oatly or that minor oat. I don't know what it's
Yeah.
called, that brand, minor oat something, the white one. Those barista milks have several ingredients in them. So if you're having that every single day, is it bad for you or no?
Look, so I've looked at some of these in quite a lot of detail, and actually the ingredients in them aren't necessarily associated with any poor health outcomes. So like I said, some additives, no need to stress about, right?
Oh,
Now, things might come out in the future.
okay.
So it's up to you to kind of make that decision. But like I drink them. So and
Really?
my kids have some. But like I said, I'm not having, 2 cups a day. So if you're
Right.
having loads of something, then I would
Yes.
just be like, is there not more of a wholesome, nutrient dense version of that?
Got it.
Versus it being kind of more processed. But actually, if you're having like, 100 mils in your coffee, it's not going to be, a big issue.
I'm having like 400 mils. Like to have a very milky coffee.
Yeah. So, I mean, it might be a case of looking at your whole diet and being like,
Yes.
actually, could I be getting a more nutrient dense food to
Yes.
replace that?
Makes sense. Before we close, what would you say is one food that will help you with your gut health?
Now, I don't like picking favorites when it comes to foods, but there is those super six plant-based food groups, right? And the
Yes.
thing that most people don't have enough of is your legumes. Chickpeas, butter beans, kidney beans, those sorts of things. And actually, a
Wow.
study from the University of Bergen showed that adding them into your diet could add an extra 2.5 healthy years to your longevity, right?
No. Right, that's it. Chickpeas, kidney beans, and broad beans are going in my diet. Butter beans are going in my diet today. And then I'm going to have a massive belly because I've shoved it all in.
You train your gut though, remember? Start small amounts and literally, like,
So
I'll have a
true.
cup of beans every day and
That's
I don't get
amazing.
bloated from them because I've trained my gut.
Right.
So it's like, again, going to the gym.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just a
So,
tablespoon every
yeah,
day.
if you want to run a marathon, don't try to do it
Amazing.
overnight. You'll get there.
Yes.
Practice.
Amazing. Thank you so much. It's been such a valuable conversation. I think for people who are listening at home who have found it, overwhelming to see the constant memes that I have and been influenced by them, hopefully this episode has debunked a lot of those issues. So thank you so much.
It's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.